One of the things that happened during the divisional round that didn't get a whole lot of attention because we were concerned about the team still playing, the Cleveland Browns hired their head coach. And the reward or punishment for Kevin Stefanski for his performance on Saturday as offensive coordinator of the Vikings was to become the 18th coach of the Cleveland Browns. The announcement came yesterday, and Peter, it's funny, when you look at the statement from Jimmy and Dee Haslam in what they're looking for in a coach, basically, they should have just said, we want the exact opposite of Freddy Kitchens. And now they have it in Kevin Stefanski. Your thoughts on a guy who really doesn't have much more experience than Kitchens did when he got the job a year ago?
Well, Mike, I think this is going to be a great chemistry experiment in a new kind of way of running a National Football League team. And I think, we all remember in Moneyball, the Art Howe character who never would accept analytics or never would accept playing what he felt were lesser players who got on base all the time instead of more big hitters. Okay. And that is going to be the test here. Mike, I see by your post on this issue about the Browns quarterback search, that you've talked to people who know things. I think I've talked to people who know things. And there's no question that this is expected to be, with Kevin Stefanski, a collaborative effort to run the football side and the football team between Stefanski and the guys who are going to work behind the scenes in analytics and deep football metric analysis. And I believe that there's quite a few contenders for this job, but not only contenders for this job, but others in football who probably would not have wanted to work under these circumstances. Stefanski obviously accepts it.
And Peter, from the standpoint of having harmony and cooperation and minimal dysfunction within the Browns organization, I like the idea. The chief strategy officer, Paul DePodesta, basically made this hire. Let him, if you're going to give him the influence, let him pick the coach, because the worst case you could have is this ongoing rivalry and tug of war and friction and finger pointing in the organization between the football guys and the analytics guys. Get everybody on the same page and see if it works. I think that's a good thing. But here's the other side of it. If this doesn't work, at some point, DePodesta has to be as accountable as John Dorsey, Freddy Kitchens, anyone else who's been fired by Jimmy Haslam. And if giving DePodesta the power to hire who he wants and set the table the way he wants it, if it does not work, then the next time they hit the reset button, they need to reset entirely and completely, and DePodesta has to have that same accountability that anyone else would have. I think it's only fair. If it works, great. If it doesn't, then it's time for a new approach altogether. This is a great litmus test of whether or not this approach is going to work, because finally, after 4 years, everybody's on the same page.
Well, Mike, I'm not sure that that's true, and I'll tell you why. Because Jimmy Haslam, whenever he has his press conference, is going to be asked about this, and he's going to vehemently say, this is my decision. This was not Paul DePodesta's decision. He had definitely had a say in it, but this was not his decision. It was mine. And
right.
Well,
right.
but
it's his,
Mike,
Peter,
hey, Mike,
it's his decision.
Mike,
Paul, let me say something. Paul DePodesta had the keys to the search. Paul DePodesta, I'm told by multiple sources, was talking to people who were never even interviewed. He was screening and deciding and handpicking who gets put in front of the person who's making the decision. And the person who sets the table with the options has so much power over the process. And if Paul DePodesta has the ability to constantly whisper in the ear of Jimmy Haslam and influence him, it doesn't take much to get him to hire Kevin Stefanski. I think Paul DePodesta had far more sway over this.
But Mike, the last two coaches, Paul DePodesta lost on. So you're saying in your world, in your theory, okay, so he gets one coach now and then he gets fired? What about all the traditionalists who have been picking coaches there forever and who are still working? I mean, that's why I don't buy what you're saying. I don't buy that if Stefanski goes 3-13 the next 2 years, and again, we don't know how it's going to play out. We just simply don't know. But I do believe that there is enough. I mean, look, they interviewed traditional guys who everybody in the league was interested in, not just guys who only Paul DePodesta was interested in. There's no evidence to me that they eliminated guys before the now maybe they did, but I haven't heard evidence that they eliminated the guys because DePodesta whispered in Haslam's ear, "Oh, he's a dinosaur, Jimmy. We don't want him."
I just think that DePodesta finally got the chance to hire the guy he wanted. And again, I support that because there has been a poisonous atmosphere within the Browns organization during this 4 years of analytics and football trying to jam together. It is far from a chocolate and peanut butter situation, at least in Cleveland. So it has resulted in a revolving door, with DePodesta never being the guy who goes down, but it's been the other guys, the football guys, the Sashi Browns, the John Dorseys, the coaches they hired who are out. My point is, if you're going to let DePodesta, who successfully won every stare down with everyone he came up against since he's been there, if he's in charge, fine, you're in charge. And if it works, you get all the rewards that go along with it. And if it doesn't, you get the same outcome that everybody else who's been fired by the Browns has gotten. And look, it's harsh, but it's reality in the NFL. When there are 32 teams who are constantly competing with each other, there are going to be good teams, there are going to be bad teams. And if the Browns don't break the cycle of being a bad team with DePodesta picking his guy, then I think he suffers the same fate that we saw Sashi Brown and John Dorsey suffer.
Did he win the stare down on Freddy Kitchens? No. Did he win the stare down on Hugh Jackson?
Well, he did, but no. Peter, he's still employed.
So
everybody else is fired.
You
he
just
did win.
Said,
he won.
You just said.
He won the I told you so.
You just said that Paul DePodesta has won every stare down he's ever come up. The two biggest ones before this one, he lost.
No,
how can you
Peter,
say he's won every stare down?
I'm talking about the real stare down. I'm talking about guns, not knives. I'm talking about
the head coach is not
goes.
A real stare down?
No, Peter, I'm talking about employment. All these other guys got fired. DePodesta is still there. So when he loses the battle and wins the war, loses the battle, wins the war. He's won all the wars. He's lost some battles, and because those guys ended up being crappy coaches, it allowed him to win the war. He's still employed. That's my point. It's a very simple concept. DePodesta is now in the spotlight. Even though he's part-time and he refuses to move to Cleveland, he's in the spotlight. He's the guy. He picks Stefanski. If this goes sideways or stays sideways, as the case may be, I think they need to flush it and start over again and come up with a new approach. And if it works, great. But if it doesn't, it's time for the Browns to have a new approach. And some fans would say if it doesn't, it's time for the Browns to have new ownership. But good luck making that happen.
Yeah, I would just say, let's see what happens. I'm as dubious about the football analytics people poring over a game plan on Friday or Saturday and saying, we like this call, we don't like this call. That really kind of eliminates. And look, Mike, I am a firm believer in analytics. It's one of the reasons why the Baltimore Ravens, for instance, like Pro Football Focus, says and believes adamantly that pass coverage guys, because of their scarcity, are much more valuable than pass rush guys. It's why the Baltimore Ravens, to make it very simple, let go of Zadarius Smith and chose to keep Marcus Peters, even though Marcus Peters at times has been a very disruptive guy in locker rooms. They did that because they believe in pass coverage. So I believe that analytics is vitally, vitally important to the success of a team. Now, having said that, I'm not sure that I want my analytics guys sitting in there with the coach on Saturday night saying, okay, we've analyzed the 220 plays in your game plan on offense this week, and the following 115 we don't like, so we strongly recommend that you kill them. That I don't like. But I do recommend that those guys be able to say, hey, coach, these are the ones that we believe have the best chance to succeed.
Peter, if you owned a football team, would you hire Kevin Stefanski or Josh McDaniels to be the coach?
Josh McDaniels.
Why do you think the Browns didn't hire him?
I don't know the answer to that, but I know that last year at this time, Kevin Stefanski was a beloved guy by some people in that Cleveland building, including Paul DePodesta, from everything that I've heard. So, I assume that's why he got the job. But I also am not sure that, when they interviewed Josh McDaniels, what did he say about this process that they were planning to use with the head coach? I found it really interesting that Josh McDaniels and his wife got on a plane to Cleveland. When does your wife usually come on a job interview? When it's expected you're going to get the job. So I'd like to know what happened during that interview, what was said, what vibes were given off. And I don't know the answer to that. And I also don't know if they were going to hire McDaniels anyway over Stefanski, because clearly after last year's process, they like Stefanski a lot. So I can't answer what happened last Thursday in that meeting. The one thing I can say is that if it were me and it were a clean slate, I'd hire Josh McDaniels in a second. I think he's a terrific coach. And I think what has happened to him is that he is getting black marked for what happened in Denver a decade ago when he was about 19 years old. And he's getting black marked because he turned down the Colts. Now, I totally get that one. I get it. He accepted the job and then he turned his back on it after the Super Bowl that year. So I get it if you say, look, I'm not going to hire you because of that, but then don't interview him. Once you've interviewed him and brought his wife to town, it's obviously you've done your due diligence and you have basically accepted the fact that maybe there were extenuating circumstances that led to him turning down Indianapolis.
Peter, I firmly believe, based upon everything I've seen, everything I've heard, that if Josh McDaniels had gone in there and said, yes, I'm okay with that, yes, I'm okay with that, yes, I'm okay with that, to everything that Kevin Stefanski said, yes, I'm okay with that too, Josh McDaniels would have been the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. It comes down to, very simply, Stefanski is willing to do everything that DePodesta and Haslam want, and McDaniels, hey, you either want me to coach the team or you don't. Bottom line.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.